Welcome to the Scale Your Business Better with Tech podcast. I'm your host, Jay Farr at Tech Fusion Systems. Our guest is Cary Prejean at CFO Consulting, and that's his website, strategicbusinessadvisors.org. Cary, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Jay. Glad to be here.
My pleasure. Do you want to kick us off and give us a brief overview of what Strategic Business Advisors does and what you're all about?
Yeah, let me answer that with telling you about who it is I typically work with. I typically work with business owners or small and medium-sized businesses who are tired of being chained to their businesses, who can't take any kind of extended time off. They're working 80 to 100 hours a week, and they basically feel like they're a glorified employee. They don't work on the business, they work in the business. And what happens over time is you start a small business, you got to do everything. And if you never step back and build a team of people who can step up and do all the stuff you were doing in the beginning, you're going to be a slave to that. And the other thing is you'll be addicted to doing it your way, which is a huge trap. I want things done my way. I don't know if you remember De Niro's character in the movie Casino, but it's like, there's three ways to do things around here. There's the right way, there's the wrong way, and the way I do things. And that's where we do things around here, my way. So that's a huge trap for business owners, and they think because they started a business, because they own the business, because they've been there since the beginning, they know best how to manage the business. And the typical entrepreneur is that data set, that mindset is usually antithetical to what makes a good manager. Good manager wants slow and steady, rinse, wash, rinse, repeat. Business, the entrepreneur, he's out there in the wild blue yonder, try this idea, try that idea. But in terms of execution, they're very bad. So it's helping business owners decouple from the being in their business and become more managing, as they say, from a 10,000 foot level, taking the business to the next level and managing by the numbers. That's results I produce.
Okay, it's interesting, and I think that pretty much all entrepreneurs understand that's such an easy trap to fall into, isn't it? Because you start a business, you put your blood, sweat, and tears into it, and if you're fortunate enough to survive and make it to that level, I think there's a level of fear to do it any other way because that's what kind of got you to where you are. What's your advice to business owners that kind of, to not really any fault of their own, kind of fall into that stuck mindset of this is the way I got here and this is the way we have to keep doing things and I'm the only one who can do it? How do you help them break out of that mindset and open them up to maybe the idea of doing things differently?
And what you said is very critical. It's a mindset. In other words, it's a perspective, it's a narrative that they live by. It's an assessment they made that they're the best to run the business. They're not willing to trust anybody else to run it. It's got to be their way. And the way to, if that's what your mindset is, you're not going to change. You're not going to step back. You're going to, look at the rest of your life. That's where you're going. You're not going to get to the next level. You're not going to manage from 10,000 feet. You're not going to manage by the numbers because you're going to always want to have your hands in everything. So the question is, are you willing to change? Not just willing to change, are you committed to changing to where you're free of the day-to-day hassles of your business? Because if you're committed to change, I can help you, but you got to be committed to change. Because if you're not, if you want to keep doing the same thing and expect different results, that's Einstein's definition of insanity. So the question is, do you like working 80 to 100 hours a week? Do you like not being able to take, say, 4 weeks off if you wanted to? Do you like having to fool with all the little nitty-gritty things that your employees can't seem to get together? If you like fooling with all that stuff, then keep at it. But if you want to change things, you're going to have to commit to you're going to have to become a different person. You're going to have a different mindset, a different narrative to not be trapped in there because it's your narrative that has you there, nothing else.
Yeah, I like what you said there, and that was Albert Einstein, at least was one of the people who made that famous quote, if you continue doing the same things over and expect different results, that's the definition of insanity. And I follow Alex Hormozy a lot. He talks about different seasons in your business, right? Different seasons. And so maybe the season that kind of got you launched and got you initially successful should have ended, right? In a different season, you should be in a different season now. So if you're stuck in that first season or the second season that you were in, that's not the season that's going to get you to the next level, which you kind of were talking about. There's, different levels as we progress along.
Right. It's kind of like growing up, You're a child, you stumble around stuff, and as you get older, you learn a few more things. You begin to develop physically. You get to teenagehood, and there's a lot of people. And maybe I don't know if this makes sense to you, but there's a lot of people who never mature past teenagehood. They're protracted teenagers in their 30s, 40s, 50s. I know people who attracted teenagers in their 80s. right? And then it's from this mindset of it's not my fault. I'm not responsible. I don't want to. I don't want to have to be responsible for anything. The whole change mindset, right? It's never that fault. It's always something else that's holding me back. Same thing with business owners in development of their business. They go through business cycles, but as you keep going to the next level, the business owner has to adapt and be a different leader to take the business with him. And a lot of them get stuck at certain points where they're not going to develop anymore because they think I have it, I know it, and so they stop changing. So the business stagnates, and they'll look back 20 years and say, "We're doing the same thing for 20 years. Why isn't it working so well anymore?" The world has changed, technology's changed, the market has, everything's changed. If you're not willing to adapt to that, have fun or try to have fun. Put it that way.
Along the way, yeah, try to have some
Yeah.
fun. Would you say that as an entrepreneur and a business owner and a leader, that if you want your business to change, you must change?
Say that last part again. If you want your business,
If you're an entrepreneur, if you're a business leader and you want your business to change or progress to the next level, would you say that you as a person has to change as well with it?
yeah, fundamentally, the business owner has to change. The business owner has to become a different person, has to be the leader that's going to take his business to the next level. Because in any organization, the mood, the culture, everything about it starts at the top and flows down. So if you've got this kind of closed in mindset of this is the only way we're going to do things, I don't want to hear about anything new, that's what's going to happen with the business. And that's going to translate down through the people in your organization as well. As opposed to, I'm looking for how can we do things differently? How can we do things more effectively? Who do I need to bring on the team that can do this thing so I don't have to? That's a whole different mindset, and it's gonna affect your people. They're gonna operate out of that mindset because they're looking for you for how do we dance together? How you are with your people is going to determine how they are with you within your business.
Makes perfect sense. What are some of the services that you offer to clients? How do you help them get unstuck?
First is managing by the numbers, right? That's basically fundamental. It gives the business owner some idea of what's happening as well as what to do next. And what I start with is making sure they have weekly dashboards that show them some of the key, what they call the key performance indicators in the business. So they can see is sales good, cash flow look good, it's a 6 week to 8 week cash projection they get every week. Receivables, payables, what's the agent look like on there? Inventory, if they have an inventory stale, is it turning over enough? Taxes, want to make sure your taxes being paid and filed on time. There are a bunch of different dashboards I get. So you spend 1 hour looking over all your different dashboards, and you don't go spend a half a day going through payables with accounting, or you don't go spend a half a day looking at receivables with accounting and asking about specific accounts. You assign the goal, the objective, which you want to have to your lead person in accounting, and let them be responsible for it. If they're not doing their job, call them on it. But you don't want to ever go. I have this couple that run a business, and they wind up getting involved in customer service. They'll get in customer service calls at 2 hours, and they have customer service people. Like, what? And they never have enough time. Why are you getting on a customer service call? Absolute waste of your time. Anyway.
Yeah, you were. So the question was,
sorry,
how do you
yes.
help these guys? You were talking
Right.
about KPIs, so you start by looking at the numbers.
Yeah,
And see what those things look
actionable
like.
financial data. That's what I call it, actionable financial data. What that means is you get financial data on a timely basis that you can actually take action now rather than get your financial statements on the 20th of the following month and you look back and say, oh, last month wasn't too good. Well, there's nothing you can do about last month now. The other thing is to help them look at their financial statements on a monthly basis and actually show them ratios and give them a layman's interpretation of what the financial statements are saying about their business and their performance. How financially strong are you? How liquid are you? How profitable, et cetera. And then help them set some goals for how can you improve your financial statements in the future? What are some things you're looking to? And what I see in human behavior, not just business, but human behavior is the things you focus on and pay attention to are the things that are going to improve the most. If you're paying attention to numbers, the numbers are going to improve, which means profitability is going to improve, cash flow is going to improve, and probably morale is going to improve. And not to mention your own mood.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm glad you brought that back up because I've heard that said. I've heard that said by a lot of people throughout the years, and I can't remember who the most notable person is to say it, but where you spend most of your attention or majority of your attention is where you're getting most of the most results from.
Yeah.
So it's just the more you put into something, the more you get out. And yeah, we deal with that as well. We deal with a lot of problems with KPIs and reporting when we start working with a client. They usually don't have very many. That's almost always a problem, which is very interesting that it's such a common issue. And so, one of the first things we end up doing is okay, we need to build these KPI dashboards so you have real time data so you can make data driven decisions instead of emotional ones, right? Yeah.
Or make decisions out of a mindset that doesn't empower you. That's another huge trap. And what people don't get is that whatever narrative you operate out of, it's going to empower you in some ways and it's going to disempower you in some ways, because whatever mindset you have, it's going to have its blindnesses, if that makes sense. It's in the blindnesses, or actually a lot of times it's in the misinterpretations or the negative interpretations of the way you are, the way things are in the world, that can have you be disempowered, that can have you suffer and not be effective. So that's one of the things to do is in working with business owners to actually have them examine their narrative and see what's working, what's not working. Where are they empowered? Where are they disempowered is really what the work is. If they're doing fine something, why get screw with it? So it's in the areas that they're not very effective, that they have some suffering about, that they're not, there's no power there. That's the area is going to work with and get that fixed and get them on a good path. And sometimes what it takes is they're fooling with something they really shouldn't be fooling with, and that's why they're not very effective. Who in your business can take this on for you, or do you need to hire somebody from the outside to come in start handling this to you? Don't try and make your real weaknesses your strengths. You'll frustrate yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. And something I learned early on is I try to do everything yourself. Sometimes you have to when you're starting out too. At some point, you have to realize that the things that you're really good at are the things that bring the most value to your people, your customers, and your business. And for you to try to do things that you're not good at and you don't like doing probably are setting you back more so than
Right.
putting you ahead, I think, in a lot of.
If you look at most entrepreneurs, what are they really good at? What are they really good at? They're really good at being a visionary and seeing what's possible out there and being able to capture the right opportunities, and hopefully be able to also see what perils or risks are coming at them and be able to navigate around and mitigate them. And they're also generally the best revenue generator in the house when they're pursuing that. So those are the two main things you want the business owner, the entrepreneur to work on, is being a visionary and being the main revenue generator. And that's where the other part of strategic business advisors comes in. It's in the visionary stuff that I help them. Let me put it this way. Most entrepreneurs are very good at a lot of ideas, and about 80% of them don't work that well. So it's in identifying the 20% that do work well and helping them get that implemented in their business, because that's the other thing they're not really good at a lot of times. They're not good at great idea, implementation of the thing, because they try and do it out of themselves. They try and implement their business. That's not one of their skills. You just be the visionary. We have people here that will implement it for you. But that's strategic planning. Design your business into the future so your business will be where you want it to be, rather than you're still doing the same stuff you were doing 20 years ago and it's not working so well.
Yeah, exactly. And that goes back to how you were talking about measuring the results. And I think that's probably a realistic, a relatively realistic number. 20% of your ideas are probably good ones and 80% maybe aren't so good. Or maybe some of them are good, but it's not the right time for them. But I think the most important thing is make sure you measure your results, right? To make sure you know which of your ideas are working, which ones aren't, which ones to stop doing, which ones to do more of. Can you tell us a little bit about, do you work inside of a certain niche or genre, company sizes?
Generally, probably the smallest company that I've worked with was about $1 million, $1.5 million a year in revenue. I've worked with clients as big as 75 million a year. But generally, when you start hitting that 70, 50, 75 million, a lot of times, the business can afford a full-time CFO or at least controller. They have the accountant out. They still pull me in from time to time, because the typical CPA or the typical accountant, CFO, is not going to be that strategic thinking. There are some, but the tradition of accounting is to look back and tell you what happened. Good scorekeeper, right? But in terms of, okay, Mr. Business Owner, here's your financial statements. This is what they say, and here's some opportunities for you in the future. There's some things you need to look at. Most CPAs do not come from that. They come from you're a good scorekeeper. How do I make more money? Sell more, cut expenses. Okay. Yeah, obviously. But it's like a tax advisor my father had. He was a doctor, and this is back in the day when they had 70% income tax rates. And he asked me, he says, what can I do not pay some of the income taxes? His response was, we're going to make so much money.
That's one way to go about it. That's interesting. I always assumed in the medium-sized business world that CFOs typically did do a lot of strategy. I thought that's what pretty much,
Yes, in the
yeah.
bigger companies, yes, they will be very strategic. The problem with the smaller businesses is they're generally not.
Mm-hmm.
And really,
Right.
that's to me, that's the way you have you heard of Simon Sinek in his The Infinite Game that he talks about?
Rings a bell. I don't know. I'm not too familiar
He's
with it.
he's he's I think he's British born but American raised. I'm not sure. I love his stuff. He talks about he really put himself on the map when he said begin with why do you do what you do, whereas most companies talk about what they do, how they do it, and eventually get to why. He says you begin with why. Great concept. But he also talks about participating in the infinite game, which is different than participating in a finite game. What's the distinction? A football game, basketball game, sporting event, those are finite games. There are rules, there are restrictions of the number of players allowed on the field at certain times. There are restrictions. There's certain rules that prohibit certain actions are prohibited. Some are allowed, some are required. There's a definite time thing, and the point of the game is that you have to score more points than the other team by the end of the game, right? So it's all very, you just can't have some random team suddenly come on, a third team come on the field. Whereas in the infinite game, there's basically no rules. And the point of that game is just to continue playing the game. Though as long as you manage to stay in business, you're in the infinite game. And the only time you get taken out is when either you're forced into bankruptcy or you quit. So I love his concept of people say, I want to be number one business in what? Sales, in products sold, in, what define number one. And even if you are, you're going to have a hard time proving it against other people. So really, it's like, how do you stay in the game and be the best that you can be and have great employees and be satisfied with what you're doing in terms of infinite game and just keeping the game going? So strategic planning helps you to do that. What do we need to do? What are the opportunities we need to capitalize on? What are the risks we need to mitigate? Who do we need to have on the team? What training do we need to have in there? Where are we headed? Where I see us in, say, 10, 20 years from now? What's the company going to look like? What's going to be our geographic footprint or our market footprint? What products do we do? Are we going to start manufacturing if we're just selling products now? I have a client that did that. They went from being a distributor of several manufactured goods, and eventually one of the things we helped was they had a yard in Houston, and I kept pointing out it's an underused asset. They had no block plant, breaking even. It's 23 acres right near the Houston Ship Channel on I-45. Eventually, what we came up with was to put an extruder plant with a big warehouse there back in 2015. So I got the financing for it. We got the thing put together. We started, and it boosted that gross margins from like 30 to 40% of this particular product to 75, 80%. I'm still in touch with some of the key people there, and I had lunch with the chief operating officer about, I don't know, 9 months ago, a year, and asked him, I said, how's things going in Houston? The extruder plant still going well? He says, yeah, we now have 9 extruder lines. We've got 5 warehouses. We don't buy anything from anybody. We manufacture everything.
Yeah.
So that was a huge paradigm shift that came out of some good strategic planning 8 years ago. And I think they probably tripled, quadrupled their size revenue-wise. It's incredible what happened in the space of 8 years, all because of you have an underutilized asset.
Yeah, that's interesting. And so, with a little bit of strategy, you can see opportunities like that where maybe other people may not.
Yeah, the thing of 7 extruder lines and I think five warehouses and all the stuff they're doing over there, nobody could see that when we were talking about just one extruder line. Is it going to work? Can we find some people who show us how to put it together? Can we make sure the technology, because it's fairly complicated stuff. Yes, we're able to find some people in Europe, bring them over, show us how to put the thing together, got it tested, got it going. Then you had to have people there that knew how to run the equipment. It wasn't like, oh yeah, this is lay down, just go buy the equipment, turn it on, it's going to do it itself. There was a lot of moving parts to it. Had to get the financing done, the construction and all that stuff, and coordinating all that with the bank, the manufacturer of the equipment. So the envisioning that at one point they would have 7 extruder lines and 5 warehouses full of stuff and not buy anything from anybody, become strictly a manufacturer with their own distribution channels. We couldn't think that big back then in 2015. But as the more they accomplished, the more opportunities became available. The more they could see opportunities. And so they took the ball and ran with it.
Yeah, that's interesting. When I was talking to someone the other day about businesses pivoting, businesses start out, they think they know what their business is, and a lot of times it ends up changing quite a bit as they go along because markets change, economies change, opportunities change, and like you said, you have to be able to change with it. So that's an interesting case study.
Yeah, another example was I was working with a couple of guys who were event planners. They did like festivals, music concerts and stuff, and they had people going all around the country putting these things together, building the stages, whatever. And for whatever reason, they had a drone to help them do some stuff. And the thing of getting more festivals meant they had to get more people. They couldn't really scale with that, right? So we started talking. I said construction companies use those drones to scope out the job site, and you can get elevations, all stuff. So I started talking to some construction people they knew, and next thing I was getting jobs. So now I think they're somewhere around 50% drone services and 50% event planning, event production. But it was just out of this, they just happened to have this drone, that a curious toy for one of the owners, and they've turned it into a huge chunk of their business.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's so interesting to hear those stories, and it makes you think, what am I missing? And sometimes I think you can be too close to your business. You get a little tunnel vision sometimes, and so it's good to sometimes talk to someone who's from the outside with a different pair of eyes.
Yeah, that's the thing. You get in the business and you start doing things, and after a while, it doesn't become. It's not that you have an assessment that this is the way things are done. It becomes like, this is true. This is reality. This is the way it has to be done. And you can put blinders on and not be aware. Oh wait, there's other opportunities out here. That's why one of the big questions I always ask clients to think out of is, what don't I see here? What am I blind to? What can I learn that I don't know yet? Because we all have blinds. There's all stuff we don't know. And it's in asking those questions and thinking about, what is I'm missing here, that all kinds of stuff comes out. And you're right. A lot of times an outsider can ask a question about, what about this and what about that? Oh yeah, we never thought of it. Yeah, okay. Why don't you do something with this Houston yard? It's an underproducing asset. What can you do differently with it that's going to make you money? Because you got this old antiquated block plant that's just breaking it, and you're wasting 23 acres of really valuable real estate in Houston. It got them thinking, and they came up with a brilliant idea. Now they're a whole other company.
Yeah. And I always say it doesn't cost a lot of money to ask questions, right? You can ask a whole bunch of questions, even if most of them aren't very good ones. That's okay. It doesn't cost much. But you might, out of 10 or 20 ideas, you might get something really good to come out of that. So
Yeah,
it's worth the time to think outside the box a little bit.
yeah, and a lot of times, especially entrepreneurs, they're so good at ideas. They'll come up with an idea that they're like 2, 3 steps away. That's a great idea for the future. That's a great idea for 10 years from now. You're not there yet. But yes, you're right. You have to be careful about, you can't chase all of them. So what are the best ones to chase right now? Which are the ones that you want to capture right now? Which one's going to make the biggest impact in your business?
Yeah, for sure. Timing is another important factor. Yeah, and for sure. Yeah. Do you deal at all with exit strategy with your clients? I know you
I
mentioned it.
have. I have.
Yeah.
That's part of strategic planning. Is at some point you're going to leave your business voluntarily or involuntarily, right? So let's talk about an exit plan. When do you want to leave, or what? Maybe somewhere in these 10 years, somewhere between 60 and 70, I want to be able to leave. What would you do with your business? You want to sell it to a third party? Do you have kids who are coming up you'd want to sell it to? Do you have key employees that you think would be great in selling it to them? There's a lot of different ways, a lot of different things you do. A lot of times, a big supplier will want to buy them out, so they keep that engine of buying from them going. Sometimes it's a competitor. Um, it's very rarely a customer. But yeah, there's a lot of different ways to slice that one up and make it work. But you gotta, in anticipation of that, that's when you really want to focus on your financial statements, and you want them to look as pristine, as powerful, as solid, liquid, really profitable as you can, because that's what the purchase price is going to be determined by. Unless as you got a diamond mine on the place and you haven't mined it.
Probably not very common.
No, not too
um,
common.
and that's a real risk for those people out there that don't do much planning for an exit. They think, well, I'll sell it someday, and that's my plan. When that day comes, it's not going to be ready to sell most of the time. That's a real risky way to go about it.
Yeah, the risk is that you're not going to be paying attention to what your financial statements look like. Generally, because most business owners don't know how to read their financial statements. They don't know what half that stuff means. So when you get to the point where you're going to want to sell, you don't want to have a lot of debt on your balance sheet. You want none if possible. You want to be very strong financially. You want to be very liquid. You want to be as highly profitable as you can. You want to have really Spartan kind of expenses. You don't have a lot of fat. You don't go do silly things like buy a $2 million sailboat inside the company. Or I saw one guy, he bought what did he buy? It's a horse farm. And he bought it to put in his companies. It's a money pit. Nobody's going to buy that. You're going to have to get rid of that.
And it takes time to plan out a good exit strategy too, right? A lot of times, if a business owner thinks, okay, I want to sell in 5 or 10 years, that would probably be planned early because you have a lot of stuff that have to get put in place. And definitely should talk to someone like yourself. Okay,
5 years is a very short time fuse in terms of getting the business ready to sell and having an exit strategy and who you're going to sell to and what price you're going to be able to get. There's a lot of fact. And here's the other thing: you have to amass what we call a vault of documentation of your corporate charter or your corporate articles of incorporation, tax returns, financial statements, insurance policies, ownership documents. There's a literal vault of stuff that you're going to need to successfully sell your business, unless you're just going to, some places just come in and buy your assets. Just buy your assets and your customer list, and that's it. Mm-hmm. They don't want to take on the corporate risk of buying your company and maybe some tax risk or some liability risk down the road that they don't know about.
Yeah, I'm guessing in most cases you don't get nearly as much if you're only selling the assets, though, right? You don't get nearly.
No, there's a lot to the ongoing concern that the company name's going to survive, that the reputation is going to survive, and that you transition from who owns it now to these are the new owners and they do it just as good or better than me. That takes a few years to get that transition in place. But if somebody just comes along, buys your assets, buys your customer list, and they try and do what you do, they may not retain as many of the clients as they thought they would.
Yeah, and I talked to a fella who is in the business of specializing in exit strategy, and he told me a story about a client that they had. It took 7 years to sell after they were ready because it took that long to line up the right buyer, and the buyer had to get their things in order, and so that can be a process too. So don't wait till the last minute is the lesson there.
Yeah,
right?
If you say, okay, I want to retire next year, I need to find somebody to buy this business, you're not going to get optimum dollars. Unless somebody with $1 gazillion shows up and says, hey, man, I want to buy your business. That doesn't happen either.
Yeah, once in a blue moon, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. And what's the best way for people to engage with you and talk to you about your services and find out if you can help them?
What I really recommend is you can go to my website, strategicbusinessadvisors.org. There's a way you can actually schedule an appointment with me. It's free. We can have a conversation for about an hour and find out what's working, what's not working, what are your concerns you have, what are some of your goals, and we'll have a conversation, see if there's something I can help you with.
Yeah, easy to find. That's strategicbusinessadvisors.org. There's a giant blue button right in the top of the page, book an appointment. So it's super easy to get to. And then, of course, you are on LinkedIn as well. Do you have maybe a little bit of practical takeaway advice you can give to business owners out there that maybe they could take and put in place starting right away that might help them out a little bit?
Well, one of the big questions that I always start with when we start talking about strategic planning is, are you satisfied? What do I mean by that? Are you satisfied? Are you satisfied with where the business is at now? Or are you satisfied with where the business is headed? A lot of times you get, and the reason you get this is because they hadn't really thought about specifically what would it take from the business in terms of required time from them, income to them, ease of managing the business, all those things. What would it take in terms of action that you would be satisfied with your business to where I don't see I could get any better, and I want to make some other things to make it get better. But for right now, I'm totally satisfied. A mentor of mine told me, I don't know, probably 35 years ago, he said, the secret to life is being ultimately satisfied, getting exactly what you want. The secret behind that is how do you get all that? Obviously, you have to ask for it. Yeah, but before that, you have to know exactly what you want before you can ask for it. And that's why most people spend almost no time thinking about developing. This takes time to really know what it is you want exactly in all the detailed areas, and exactly where you want your business to be. And 20 years is hard because there's so much can happen between now and then. But you can say, okay, a year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, I want these major bogeys to be hit. Right. And for right now, I want to have these kinds of employees. I want to be able to just work 40 hours a week. I want to be able to take off 4 weeks if I want to. I want to have a good morale here, good mood to work in. So start thinking about what it's going to take to satisfy you. Because believe me, that the whole thing of happy, it's Americans we're crazy about. It's on the Declaration of Independence, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Happy is a short-term emotion. Satisfaction is a long-term mood that you get to live in, much more satisfying. That's the big thing, is begin to develop what it's going to take to get you satisfied. And when you start focusing on that, guess what? You're going to start producing those things that are going to make you satisfied. Life's a whole lot better.
That's great advice. I appreciate that. And yeah, it's a good distinction. Happy is a very short-term emotion. Satisfaction is what you need to think about long-term. Right. Awesome. Cary, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Cary Prejean at CFO Consulting, and that's strategicbusinessadvisors.org. Thank you so much.